Welcome to Research Writing, a literature review workshop by The Right Place. I'm Dr. Roper. Today we're talking about the Lit Review. So what exactly is the Lit Review? Perhaps you wonder, what do we actually mean by literature? Well, in this case, we're not talking about Shakespeare. We're actually talking about the sources of information that are engaging with a particular issue or problem. The focus of a lit review is not just on the topic or subject matter, but on the issue or problem that the writer is attempting to address in some way. And that's an important distinction which we're going to talk about a little more in this workshop. So a literature review, then, is a synthesis of the varying perspectives on an issue or problem, not just on the subject or topic broadly speaking. So we may have a subject or topic on racism or even police brutality, but the lit review is going to be a synthesis of the varying perspectives on the issue or problem that is associated with that broad topic or subject that falls under that topic or subject area. The lit review doesn't make an argument, but it makes a case for an argument or perspective on the basis of how these other perspectives compare to one another. So it's very important for us to see the comparison and contrast of these various views that these sources have that we are summarizing in the lit review. So let's look at an example. Let's say our question or problem is, should the police be defunded? Well, there are some perspectives that say yes, communities can police themselves. So there are sources out there that discuss the fact that we no longer need the police. But there are other sources that say no, because if we didn't have the police, society would fall into anarchy. And so we would need to look at those sources and what their reasoning is for that particular point of view. And that is what the lit review would do. It would put those varying perspectives in conversation with one another. So a lit review then would summarize the main point of each source and discuss the relationship of each to the subject or issue at hand. The job of the lit review is to identify the gaps. What is not discussed? What perspective is not represented? What questions remain still about this issue? The purpose then of your research is to answer questions that haven't been answered, or dispute the answers that have been posed. Perhaps even a combination of these. So the lit review will reveal what's missing and set up the research that will follow. Here's an example. Actually, this is the first of two examples that we will look at of a literary, a paragraph that would come perhaps in a lit review. In this paragraph, the writer is putting into this paragraph a few sources that are talking about one subject area. Let's look at it together. The sentence begins, "Parents are always trying to find ways to encourage healthy eating in their children." Elena Pearl Ben Joseph, a doctor and writer for Kids Health, encourages parents to be role models for their children by not dieting or vocalizing concerns about their body image. The first popular diet began in 1863. William Banting named it the Banting diet after himself, and it consisted of eating fruits, vegetables, meat, and dry wine. Despite the fact that dieting has been around for over 150 years, parents should not diet because it hinders children's understanding of healthy eating. So, my question is, what is the question or problem that is being answered in this paragraph? If you take a moment to think about it, just looking at the information that has been shared here, we know that the topic and the subject area is healthy eating and dieting and the relationship of parents with children, but there's not a clear question at issue, at least not the way it's expressed here. We just have the general subject area, and we have information about Elena Pearl Ben Joseph. We have information about how the first popular diet began. But none of these things really connect in any meaningful way to help us know the point that is being made or that we're leading up to. So the sample paragraph begins with one idea, then drastically shifts to another. Each sentence deals with a different aspect of the subject. Rather than comparing the sources, the author simply describes their content. This leads the paragraph to veer in a different direction at the end, and it prevents the paragraph from expressing any strong arguments or conclusions. So let's look at another example. Parents are always trying to find ways to encourage healthy eating in their children. Different scientists and educators have different strategies for promoting a well-rounded diet while still encouraging body positivity in children. David R. Just and Joseph Price suggest in their article, Using Incentives to Encourage Healthy Eating in Children, that children are more likely to eat fruits and vegetables if they are given a reward. Similarly, Elena Pearl Ben Joseph, a doctor and writer for Kids Health, encourages parents to be role models for their children. She states that parents who are always dieting or complaining about their bodies may foster these same negative feelings in their kids. Try to keep a positive approach about food. Martha J. Nepper and Wei Wen Chai support Ben Joseph's suggestions in their article, Parents' Barriers and Strategies to Promote Healthy Eating Among School-Age Children. Nepper and Chai note, parents felt that patience, consistency, educating themselves on proper nutrition, and having more healthy foods available in the home were important strategies when developing healthy eating habits for their children. By following some of these ideas, parents can help their children develop healthy eating habits while still maintaining body positivity. Do you notice a difference? What is the question or problem that is being answered in this paragraph? In this example, the author puts each source in conversation with the other. Rather than simply describing the content of the sources in order, the author uses transitions like similarly and shows the relationship between each source. We are able to see how they compare. That's the important difference. So this process takes time. In order to write a lit review, you have to do a lot of reading. You'll also read a lot of stuff you might not end up using. The idea is that you're looking for the different perspectives that surround a particular topic, and you'll need to look and think about how those different perspectives compare to one another. And that is definitely going to take some time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means for you, the researcher. You're going to have to estimate the amount of time that you think it will take to conduct research and double it. Expect to make trips to the library, even if that means virtually, by going to the library databases. You're going to need to allow time for that gathering of materials that you will need. And then you're going to need to allow time for reading the things that you find. But when we talk about reading, let's think of reading in a little bit different way. Think about the research process as a scavenger hunt. Your first step is identifying the purpose and audience for the project that you're working on. You first have to know what it is that you're doing and why. that will determine everything else that you do. That will determine the kinds of sources that you look for and the reason that you proceed once you find them. What is the problem you're trying to solve with this project, right? What is the question you're trying to answer? That will be determined by your audience. If it is for a class, your professor is your audience, but that professor may be asking you to do an assignment that has another audience in mind, and you'll need to think about that. So, begin with a question. What is your key question or problem? And who is talking about this? As you do your scavenger hunt to go in search of sources, you want to think of yourself as someone who is joining a conversation. Your subject area has been studied, written about, and perhaps even debated long before you got here. Your first step is to see what others have said on this topic already. Don't look for sources that say what you're saying. Look for sources that are talking about your subject. Your goal is to listen and compare the different perspectives. Notice I have listen in quotation marks because by reading, you are listening. Now, we all love Google. Google has a wealth of information for us. But in this case, when we're doing this kind of academic work, Googling is a little like fishing in the ocean. You'll find a lot of stuff, but likely not find the kind of stuff that you really need. I would encourage you to go here and search here for what you need. It's just as easy to find sources here as it is to find them in Google. All you have to do is click on the link to the e-journals, the online databases, and it will take you to subject-specific resources that have been vetted by our librarians, and you can search by subject, by topic, by question, by keywords and key terms, and find the kind of peer-reviewed sources that you will need that will allow you to join these academic conversations that you need to in order to become an expert in this field or knowledgeable about the subject area that you are doing research on. And that is exactly what doing the Lit Review is about. Library resources are always trustworthy. Librarians do the work of vetting for you. So look for databases that hold collections from your field of study. For lit reviews, professors usually want you to include peer-reviewed journal articles only, and so of course you can select that option when that is required. And what do we mean by peer-reviewed? Peer-reviewed sources are those that have been created by scholars in the field and reviewed by other scholars in that same field. So that's how you know the information is credible. Remember that sources are people. The question you want to ask is, who is the person or group of people who have created this source? Who do they represent? And what was this created for? This article that you have found, this book chapter that you have found, this ebook that you have found, what was it created for? Who was it created by? What was it intended to do? That's what you need to think about. These sources are credible, yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are not biased or expressing opinions. They may be expressing professional opinions or educated opinions, but they're still opinions. But you need to understand as you read them who it is they're speaking to, from what perspective, what they're speaking back to or in response to, and you need to be able to take all of that into account as you interpret the information that is shared. And so that's why I say this is very much like a scavenger hunt. You're seeking this information, and then you're going to need to critically assess what you find. Knowing what it is and where it came from will help you know how it contributes to the conversation about the issue. So as I said, knowing where it comes from helps you to know how it fits and where it fits. Even when researchers go into the lab, they begin with a hypothesis. That means they have an opinion about what will happen. That means even their objective report about what happened will be influenced by what they thought would happen. So how does the researcher's hypothesis influence his or her interpretation of the data? Or if someone else is writing about someone else's research, how are they interpreting that data, and to what uses are they putting it? You need to be able to think about that as well. Just because there are numbers presented in a document does not necessarily mean that it is without bias, or that it is above reproach. And how do your assumptions influence your interpretations of data that you come in contact with? These are the kinds of questions that you need to think about as you do your research. Research is not reading and regurgitating information. It's reading, thinking, and processing information in order to do something. So, what will each source that you find help you to do? Here's a tool for evaluating sources. The acronym is CARS. You want to think about the credibility of the source. Is it created by a person or organization who knows the subject? Is it accurate? Is the information current, complete, and correct? Is it reasonable? Is it truthful and unbiased? Or are you able to identify the bias? Biases that are hidden are usually the ones that you should be wary of. What about support? Does it have verifiable sources? Every article that you read should list the sources that were used. You can then follow those sources to see where that author's information came from. Now, research can be overwhelming unless you find a way to manage it. Start by categorizing each source that you find so that you know how you will use it in your research project. BEAM is an acronym that helps to identify the way each source or aspects of each source contributes to the topic under study. Does your source provide you with background information about this subject? Does it provide you with evidence that something is true or not true about the subject? Does this source provide you a perspective on this subject, an argument for or against something? Does this source propose a theory or method for understanding this subject? Now, a source is not a monolith. A monolith is something having a uniform, massive, redoubtable, or inflexible quality or character. That just simply means that even one source could be any number of things for you. You may read one article and find parts of it that you agree with, parts that you disagree with, parts that you are confused by, parts that you don't understand, parts that one chapter or study may provide you with background, other parts may provide you with some theory or concept, other parts of the source may offer a method or solution, and so on. So as you take notes, you may label parts of the same source with each of the letters in this acronym. Your responses to these questions will determine how you use each source. So think of reading as active rather than passive. Reading is studying and observing. Sources could be books, articles, or experiments that you do yourself. The goal is to think critically and extract relevant information. Study each source to see how it answers your key question or problem. And when you approach a reading, you may need to break it up. Read the intro and conclusion first. Go back to the methods and procedures later. Think about how they arrived at their conclusion. Are there parts you don't understand? Write down any questions that you have. Don't hesitate to get those questions answered. Don't just skip over things that you don't understand. Email your teacher. Partner up with a classmate. Call on us. We may even be able to help you. You can make an appointment to talk about something that you're struggling with. We don't just help with writing, we help with reading too. And I always encourage students to take a break. Divide up your reading and study sessions. Give yourself a reasonable schedule to follow. You know what works best for you. During your breaks, look up the answers to your questions. When you come back to your reading task, you'll be refreshed and ready to face it again. When you do, perhaps it'll make more sense to you after you've come back to it a second time. Then read the other sections of the article. See how it answers your key question or problem. Take notes on the information that you think you will need in your paper. Note-taking is going to be really important during the research process, particularly important for the lit review. Sloppy note-taking increases the risk that you will unintentionally plagiarize. Unless you have taken notes carefully, it may be hard to tell whether you copied certain passages exactly, paraphrased them, or wrote them yourself. This is especially problematic when using electronic source materials, since they can easily be copied and pasted into your own documents. So, I suggest after the first reading, in a sentence or two, write the overall main point the author is making, in your own words, in your notes. After the second reading, write a sentence or two summary of each section. What you're doing is creating an outline of each article in your notes. Make sure you identify the words that you copied directly. Put quotations around those exact words. Jot down the page number and author or title right then and there. Also, make sure you keep a working bibliography. This will be very important for the final paper. When we talk about a research log, we're talking about a notebook that contains only the notes that you take while doing research. If you keep everything in one place, you'll be much less likely to be stressed at the end. If you're doing an experiment or case study, this log would be where you record what you observe. If you're reading texts, this is where you record the information that you find that is relevant to your subject. For each source, you begin with the bibliographic information, which identifies where it's from, followed by notes and quotes taken from that source. Here's an example. At the top of this paper, you see that there is an author's name written along with the title of his book. This is for an MLA paper, so it is formatted for MLA. author's last name, first name, and then the title of the book, the publisher, and the year. Depending on the style of publication that you are, the documentation style that you are using, you might do this in your notes in the format that it is to be in for the final paper. Then you save yourself the trouble of trying to figure that out later. What follows under this citation in the notes are whatever notes that I take about this particular source. So there's a quotation, and then there's some notes that I jotted down about that quote, and then there's another quotation. And notice that the parts that are quoted directly from the source have quotes around them. So these are Malcolm Gladwell's exact words and the page number where it came from. The parts that were my own words and my own opinion don't have quotes around them. So in my notes, I can distinguish what came from him and what came from me. And when I get ready to write the paper, I will just go to my notes and pull directly from here. Also, I can identify what part of my notes I want to label as background, evidence, argument, or method as well. So, for your lit review assignment, your professor may have particular requirements for its format. I would suggest looking at some other resources for writing the lit review, which can be found on the Purdue OWL. The link is here, and you can follow it to their page where they have some excellent resources and additional questions that you can ask yourself as you write the lit review. Also, remember that you can always come to the right place virtually by going to our website, by emailing us at right.place@aamu.edu. We do offer virtual consultations. You can email us and send us a paper that you have a question about, and then we do these regular workshops also that you can join as well. Our next workshop will be Thursday, July 9th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will talk about writing the research paper. There's so much more to get into. Once we get the lit review done, we have to talk more specifically about finding, evaluating, integrating, and documenting sources. So I hope you'll join us.